background check can encompass a lot of things. I think for most people, the first thing that comes to mind is a criminal background check. And that's true. That is included in the vast majority of orders that customers place with us. But it also includes some other things. And so most businesses will have a variety of needs, maybe for different types of positions that they hire for. And then also by industry, there'll be different needs, but you could be talking criminal background checks, you could be talking driver history, drug screening, physical exams, and then verification services as well. So, verifying is the education and the employment history that they have on their resume, is that true and accurate?
The following podcast is brought to you by Thryv. Manage, run, and grow your business all from one dashboard using one login. Small business runs better on Thryv.
Hey, this is Gordon Henry at Winning on Main Street. And very often here at Winning on Main Street, we like to focus on ways to grow and generate revenue for your business. But sometimes you have to look at the downside of running a small business. And this week, we have an expert on how to protect your small business through background checks for your small business, making sure you hire the right people and, just as importantly, avoid the wrong ones. We're speaking with Travis Reiter. Welcome, Travis.
Hey, Gordon, thanks for inviting me to the show.
Good to have you, Travis. So a quick background on Travis. He is the co-owner and operator of Perfect Fit Background Checks, an employment screening company out of Austin, Texas. Travis and his partner and fiance, Rachel Sperling, purchased the business in early 2021, acquiring a software platform and brand that was launched more than 15 years ago and has kept many of the support staff. They've been with the platform for more than a decade, many of them. He's lived in Austin for nearly 20 years. Prior to buying Perfect Fit, he worked in sales and account management at a variety of tech companies ranging from Fortune 500 to startups. Now he's focused on providing a better option for small businesses when it comes to pre-employment screening and background checks. What should listeners get out of this episode? Hiring is a key piece of running any business, right? And it's important to do the background check to make sure you're getting what you think you're getting in terms of your new employee and their qualifications and background. Perfect Fit Background Checks is suited for the SMB, the small business, and just may save you a lot of pain later. So check it out. Travis, welcome to the show. Before we get into the whole background check industry and what you do there, I'd love to learn just a little bit about your background. So why don't you tell us sort of how you got into this? What was your first job and where did you go from there?
Yeah, so my career kind of spans a lot of different types of jobs. Through high school and college, I worked at my uncle's auto body shop fixing cars, and then post college, I graduated with an economics degree. If anyone out there has an economics degree, you're probably not using it directly as an economist. So, really leaned into the sales world that is so vibrant here in Austin. We have a lot of software and tech companies here, but not before taking a detour into insurance. And through the sales experience, worked at large companies, small startups, kind of the whole gamut there. But the entrepreneurship interest has been there for a long time. So I did some freelance web design throughout college and even after college, like on the side, in addition to my day job. And it was something that kind of scratched the itch a little bit, but wasn't a full-fledged business. So now very excited to be in it, doing it full time.
So you mentioned your uncle's auto body shop. So was entrepreneurship kind of in your family? Was that something you were raised with and kind of always had in the back of your head?
Yeah. So with working with him, that was over the course of like 7 summers through high school and college. And, in an auto body shop, I think there are probably 10 or 12 of us in total. So whenever you're in a small organization too, it's something maybe you don't appreciate until you work in a small business where everything that you do matters. It's easy to kind of realize or not realize when you're working with a large company, not seeing the direct impact of what your work is doing. And so that was something that was really neat. You feel the responsibility and sometimes the pressure that comes with it, but oftentimes whenever there's pressure, then there's also the associated fulfillment and kind of pride that comes with it whenever you achieve whatever your objective is with that. So that was certainly the first place. But then with the freelance web design that I was doing, that was another one where the output was very tangible. So that's not the case for background checks. We don't see a lot of tangible output beyond just the customer relationships that we have. But that it being a little bit different, it's still kind of the same excitement whenever you talk to someone and they're like, "We're just so excited that we found you. We're happy to have someone that we can just call and talk to, and just having someone that's happy with what you're doing for them. I think that's what a lot of us do it for, right?
So what was there an event or some specific thing that made you say, I'm going to ditch the regular day job and move and basically buy my own company? How did that actually, what triggered that?
Yeah. So this has been the plan for a long time, but it wasn't necessarily set to be something that I did at a specific date. I just knew that I want to be prepared for it whenever the right time came. So
Hmm.
my fiance and I had been planning to live abroad actually at some point as a bucket list item for her. She eventually like won me over to the idea, and so once COVID hit, we started planning for that and planning to make that move as soon as COVID would allow us to, and that was a very natural time for us. So we lived in Portugal for 2022, and we knew that that would be tough trying to maintain our day jobs and living 6 hours ahead. So we were like, okay, this is a natural time. So we started not only planning to move abroad for a year, but also planning to buy a business. So that's when the shopping process started. That's when we found this opportunity. And one of the key things we were looking for was a business that we could operate online. And fortunately, the right one came along at the right time. And here we are 2.5 years later.
A lot of people who listen to the show are thinking about buying businesses. How specifically did you go to like Biz Buy Sell? Was it one of those clearinghouse websites that you went to? How did you find out about this particular business that you ended up purchasing?
It actually was Biz Buy Sell, and I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of us maybe start out there, browsing the listings. And my younger brother was a huge help to us actually in the purchasing process. So he has experience in investment banking and then private equity, and he was also shopping for a small business at the same time. So we were talking to each other, and I think maybe he was sharing more advice with me than I was sharing with him. But we he had recommended a book called Buy Then Build that really focuses on the idea that you can mitigate a lot of risk by buying a business as opposed to building it from scratch. And the other big takeaway for me was don't limit yourself to a hobby or an industry that you're familiar with necessarily, but to understand your skill set and then look for an opportunity that needs what your skill set is. And so that really changed my perspective on it. And then before I ended up really working with any like business brokers, the right one came along. My brother was the one that actually found it on Biz Buy Sell, sent in my direction, and it worked out.
Hmm, fantastic. Yeah, so many people hear these messages often at a college graduation where they say, follow your passion, pursue your passion. And I guess we'd all be rock stars and center fielders if that's what we did, right? But often you've got to sort of pursue what you're good at or what you think you can actually execute on and make a living, right? It's not always just about, or maybe that becomes your passion because you're good at it and you can make a living and maybe build it, and that's exciting to you. It's not always the thing you wanted to do first in life as a teenager.
Right, right. Yeah. And I mean, there's certainly people out there that do find that, and I'm sure that's incredible. But for most of us, that's not the case.
Right, exactly. So why don't we get into the perfect fit background check business? I guess before we get into that, I know you gave me some information to share that, for those who are listening, part of this conversation may sound like legal advice, but it's important for you to note that this isn't intended to be used as legal advice, and a business should always consult with their attorney to establish what's right for their business. So that's an important thing just to keep in mind as we talk through this background check issue. So, Travis, first, let's just set the stage. What exactly is a background check?
Yeah, so background check can encompass a lot of things. I think for most people, the first thing that comes to mind is a criminal background check. And that's true. That is included in the vast majority of orders that customers place with us, but it also includes some other things. And so most businesses will have a variety of needs, maybe for different types of positions that they hire for. And then also by industry, there'll be different needs, but you could be talking criminal background checks. You could be talking driver history, drug screening, physical exams, and then verification services as well. So, verifying is the education and the employment history that they have on their resume, is that true and accurate?
Right.
Um, so technically that is physically what it is. But I also make it a point to communicate to our clients what they are not. And so I think it's just as important to understand that like they're a risk mitigation tool. And they're not some kind of like moral litmus test to say, hey, this is a good person or a bad person, and they're a bad person, so they shouldn't work with us. It's a tool that should be used responsibly to kind of understand, are there risks that we should consider based on what this person is going to be responsible for in our business, and then using that information as appropriate in the hiring decision.
Yeah. You and I were talking just a bit before the show, and I was saying, yeah, I've made a few bad hires in my career, and usually when the person didn't work out, it was because it wasn't a cultural fit. It was someone who came in. I remember one guy, and he would take a couple hours off in the middle of the day, and the rest of the company was working hard. And this guy was like on the basketball court, and people were like, "What's the deal? Like, we can't get him in a meeting when we need him," that kind of thing. And it just sort of didn't feel like a fit. But it wasn't necessarily somebody who had done something wrong in their life where you could find it on a piece of paper where they had cheated or lied or hurt somebody or done something like that. So how does that stuff show up? I mean, in your background check assessment, can you pick out somebody who might not be a fit for the company?
Yeah, so there's ways that could come to light through the process, and part of that again will depend on what you decide to include in your search package. Some things are pretty black and white, like checking for a criminal record. However, if you decide to include like an employment verification, then when we place that phone call, part of the questions that we ask may be like, are they eligible for rehire? If we're, or professional reference checks are another place where we have a conversation with someone that knows the person, and so we may learn a little bit more about that, understand what some of their strengths are, weaknesses are, and so some of that can come to light. It's not always guaranteed. Some people are maybe a little guarded about what they're willing to divulge, so it's certainly not a cure-all, but um, it can help sometimes.
Okay. So how does it work, just practically breaking it down? If I have a company and I want to do a background check with you, what do I need to do?
Yeah, so the process is an employer just trying to acquire the information is very simple. So our most popular order method is, I believe, offered by the vast majority of vendors nowadays. And so we call it the invitation method. And essentially, all you have to do as an employer is decide which background check package is appropriate for this role. And once you've selected that, then just provide the name and the email address for the person. And that's it. The rest of it will provide updates along the way by email. And so what'll happen is we'll send the email invitation to the candidate, and they'll just click a link, and we'll walk them through the whole process. And essentially, that's just collecting the appropriate information that we need from them to perform the searches that we need, and then also providing the appropriate paperwork. So there are certain authorization and disclosure forms that have to be presented, and some of them have to be signed. And so we'll take care of that. And yeah, so the actual process and the action that has to be taken by the employer is very simple in terms of actually executing a check.
What does this cost to run a background check through Perfect Fit?
Yeah, so again, it'll depend on what's in the package. Our most popular package that really just focuses on criminal searches is $24, which we're very proud to offer that. So one of the things that made us interested in moving into such a mature industry, background checks have been around for decades. They're not necessarily revolutionizing anything or redefining anything. a lot of the terminology and communication that I was used to in the startup industry. And my fiance Rachel, she worked at Meta prior to this, and so very different environments from a mature industry like background checks. But something that was very interesting to us whenever we were investigating it was the pricing is just very opaque. The largest vendor in the space, I believe, is Checker, and they actually are transparent with their prices. I think they're the only like major vendor that is, and most of the others, you have to talk to a sales rep. They want to get you on the phone. They want to like give you a price, and then you kind of play the whole pricing game, right? And you think you're getting a discount, but at the end of the day, you're still not entirely sure if the price you got is competitive or not competitive. Uh, and so for when we were doing our research and kind of seeing like, okay, what are the prices that are out there? In addition to the transparency thing, it was also very common for small businesses to pay drastically different prices than large businesses. So, if there are any HR folks listening to this that work at a large corporation, like $24 probably doesn't sound that impressive. But if you're a small business, like you're probably paying 50, 60, $70 sometimes for a basic criminal check like that. So that was something that was very attractive to us, was there seemed like there was a very clear opportunity to just work with small businesses. You don't want to try and boil the ocean with any business, right? It's important to like find your niche and like zero in on that. And so we saw a very clear opportunity there. Just go talk to small business owners that Googled it, signed up with someone. They're like, $60 sounds reasonable, right? They move on to the next thing because they've got 10,000 things on their to-do list. So anyway, a very long and winding answer to how much is a basic check run.
Do most small businesses find you just by Googling you, or is there some other way you get found?
Yeah, so most people don't really shop for this very often. I think for a lot of people, it's a line item expense. When you're hiring someone, there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of things that have to happen, and it can be an emotional process. You're like trying to evaluate candidates, trying to figure out who's going to be a good fit for you. And I think for a lot of people, this is just like a checkbox. So like, okay, like we've done all the hard part, the interview, we found this person, like we just got to check this box to make sure we can move on. So some people do find us. A lot of times those are new businesses that are doing it for the first time. And then once they've signed up with someone, they don't often go back to it. So for us, it's a lot of times us bringing up the conversation with them. And, you know, it's something that, because it's kind of a routine expense for a lot of people, we find a lot of success just getting out and shaking hands, meeting people in person. So, we do, the online thing and, reach out to people online, but in person has been the most successful for us.
Got it. How often, when you're running these background checks, do you find a problem with a candidate? I'm just curious, is there a way to, let's say, 10% or 5%, or how many of the candidates show up as red flags?
Yeah, so I believe that across the US, it's a surprising number of people that actually have some kind of criminal record. I want to say it's like 1/3. I could be off on that, but it was a shocking number. So part of it will depend on like what industry you're in. Maybe the candidates that you're getting have skew one way or the other, but it's not terribly uncommon. And kind of coming back to like what I mentioned a few minutes ago, like this isn't supposed to be a test to like determine if someone's a good person or a bad person. It's just like understanding, like, are you putting someone in a position that may create a higher risk for a potential incident. So that there's a lot of nuance to that as well, and that's a big topic right now.
Mm-hmm.
And what is often called the fair chance hiring movement, and a lot of times that includes what is called ban the box legislation. So it's something that I think, whether it's conscious or unconscious, whenever a hiring manager does see that someone has a criminal record, it kind of taints your perspective immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And we can all do better to try and consciously not do that, but there's evidence that it still has an impact. So a lot of these ban the box laws that you see, which are pretty common, but it's a patchwork across the US right now. Like a lot of states have it, a lot of municipalities have it. There are kind of slight variations in the actual legislation in different locations, but essentially they all come back to the idea that you shouldn't ask about a criminal history until after you've had the interview and evaluated their qualification for the job. And then once you've extended an offer or a conditional offer, then run the check and then consider what is on the background check in the context of relevance. How old were they whenever it happened? Did they serve their sentence? How much time has passed? And really taking a nuanced consideration of what's on there.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you hear so much today about how to avoid discrimination in the hiring process. Is this considered an allowable factor to consider though? Like once you've done your interview, if someone shows up as having a criminal record, are you allowed, in theory, to consider that as a reason to take or not take the person?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a great question, and it's a common misconception that people have is that, okay, well, we can no longer run background checks, or oh, we're going to be forced to hire someone, and that's just not true. So the whole purpose is like give someone a fair shake at a job, like take the time to consider their qualification before you just automatically disqualify them.
Hmm.
And so that's not to say that you should hire everyone that's qualified. Like you're doing background checks for a reason, right? And
Hmm.
you're not doing any favors to anyone by putting someone in a bad position. So like if you have someone that has a tendency to speed and you're trying to hire someone that's going to be a driver for your car, you know people can change their behavior, but in general, people tend to kind of have behavioral patterns.
Hmm.
And if you're going to have them driving every day, like, are you doing them any kind of favor by putting them in a position where, they may be, creating risk, whether it's just getting a speeding ticket or, maybe being a dangerous driver on the road and putting other drivers at risk? Like, you're not doing your brand a favor, yourself a favor, the actual employee a favor. So you're really just trying to use this information to put people in a position that is best for everyone.
Yeah. So for a small local business, a lot of our listeners tend to be small local service businesses. Um, is it actually necessary to run a background check? I'm wondering if you're in a smaller market and maybe you've been around for a while. Very often you'd think the person who's applying for a job is somebody who lives locally. You may know them, you may know their family, maybe you went to high school with them. Do most of the smaller local businesses run background checks? Is this more like a big company thing to do? I was just curious. Is there a breakdown?
Yeah, so a lot of small businesses do start hiring people that they know, and that's very common. And in those situations, like, yeah, you may feel like you know that person very well. In the case of family, oftentimes you do. In the case of friends, maybe you don't know everything, but you know a lot. So a lot of this is a judgment call. Like, what are the risks of the role? Like, if you're hiring someone remotely because they're going to make sales calls for you from their house, like, there's not necessarily a whole lot of risk in that, right? But if you've got someone that you're going to hire to go knock on doors and do door-to-door sales for you, where they're going on potential customers' properties to their homes, then that's a higher risk and something that is worth considering. So um, while you think that you may know someone, I think that if it is a higher risk position, it may be worth going ahead and just doing that. So I like to encourage people to think about background checks as similar to insurance. It's, well, I was gonna say it's a lot cheaper than having an incident, but right now insurance is getting pretty expensive, and that market's kind of wild. So maybe that's not a good analogy anymore. But if you're gonna just spend $24, and if at any point it prevents one bad hire, like, it's gonna be worth it, because just the time and the expense that goes into
Sure.
having to replace someone, uh, not to mention just like whatever kind of headache and comes from an incident that may occur.
Hmm.
um there's kind of like that, like, selfish reason, but also just beyond that, like in the US, like we have a responsibility to hire responsibly.
Hmm.
This is something that we learned last year when we were living in Europe, that there's a little bit different perspective over there, but here in the US, like, negligent hiring claims are not terribly uncommon. And so, like, let's say you hire your friend that you've known for 10 years, and something happens, and then it turns out well, they did have a criminal history of this. Like,
Mm.
you can be held liable for not having been responsible and done a background check to see, okay, well, they have like multiple instances of doing XYZ. You should have been able to foresee this. So there's kind of
Good
a
point.
legal liability that you're trying to avoid here too.
Yeah, if something happens where that employee does something bad to another employee or to a customer, then you could be, I guess, sued by the customer or the other employee that you failed to spot this in the employee you hired.
Right, right,
Yeah, yeah, that's an
exactly.
excellent point. Yeah. A lot to worry about as a business owner hiring people. Good reason to use Perfect Fit. We got to
Yes.
take a quick break, Travis. We'll be right back, and we're going to hear more about Perfect Fit background checks and what's next for Travis Reiter. Don't go away.
This episode of Winning on Main Street is brought to you by Thryv, the small business management platform that you and your customers will love, no matter where you are. Thryv helps you run your business, keep organized, and get paid faster, all from one login and dashboard. Thryv makes it easy for customers to find you online, instantly interact, and stay engaged. And with free unlimited support 24/7, there really is no comparison. Go to thryv.com/pod for a quick demo to see everything Thryv can do.
We're back with Travis Reiter from Perfect Fit Background Check. So, Travis, you've been doing this now for a couple of years with your fiance Rachel. How's the business itself going? Is it achieved your expectations about, kind of growth trajectory? Everybody who buys a business has a plan. How's it going, and is it fitting the plan?
I think that's one of those things where it's like an immutable law of physics that no matter how much you plan, like, it's never going to go as planned. The one that always comes to mind is that when you're buying a business, like, they always say, okay, like, do everything you can, research all you can to plan for all of your expenses, everything you're going to need, and it's going to be double that. And so I was like, okay, all right, well, I'm going to account for that. We're just going to like double our expectations. And then, like, inevitably it still just ends up being double that. So maybe I shouldn't have doubled it in the first place. Maybe I'd be in for half the cost. I don't know. But it's been a ride. And I think that most small business owners could relate, because it's one of those things where no matter how much you plan, stuff is going to happen. So it's important to plan to guide your activities, but it's more important to be flexible with your planning and be able to pivot whenever stuff happens. So I would say that we're not where I thought we were going to be 2.5 years ago, but we've been able to be dynamic and change whenever circumstances changed. And we are really starting to see, especially this year, a lot of the momentum that we've been working on building for the last few years. And I think part of the challenge is when we bought the business, like, we started with a new brand. So the name Perfect Fit Background Checks is only 2.5 years old.
Oh,
Like, our platform and our team are very experienced, and like, that's rock solid, but like, no one knew our name. And so just launching a name from scratch, there's a ton of challenge in that. And so I think that now we're starting to see people recognize the name a little bit more. We're starting to get more reviews where people like start to trust us a little bit more. Google has seen that we've been around for a few years, so we're starting to rank better. And all the little things that you do from marketing and branding and all that is just like slowly starting to catch up. So things are absolutely booming right now, and everyone would love to see today's success yesterday or a month ago or a year ago, right? But we're in an awesome spot right now. It's been great.
good to hear. Did you make a conscious decision not to take the company's brand that you bought, or how did that work?
Yes, yeah. So it wasn't really an option for us, but that didn't deter us from pursuing the opportunity. It just ended up being a little bit bigger of a challenge than we expected, I think.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's next for Travis and Perfect Fit?
Yeah, so we're on an awesome trajectory right now, and I think that if we just like keep moving in the direction that we're moving, then we'll be a happy camper. So I think that uh, you know business owners in general are a very motivated group, and just as humans, I think that it's tough to ever be satisfied, right? So our goals right now are going to be different from our goals in a couple of years, but ultimately I'm seeking what a lot of business owners are looking for. Uh, Financial flexibility and freedom being one of them. And so part of that just comes with continued growth. And then also just the experience and the fun of owning a business. So I absolutely love having to do 20,000 different things, having to understand a little bit about accounting, a little bit about marketing, and all that stuff. That's stuff that excites me, and I love it. So for me, like, I would love for this business to just thrive over the next, 10, 15 years. And it's hard to predict anything that far out these days, especially just with all this exponential technology like AI. Who knows? Who knows where we'll be in 10, 15 years, much less, 5 years. But um, yeah, my goal would be to grow it. Would love to, hire on, grow the team a little bit. Would love to have like, uh, you know, 15 people, 20 people. I think that there's a lot of excitement and fulfillment that comes from working with a team of people. And that's something that I would love to see.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, we wish you all the best of luck, and it sounds like you're doing all the right things. So I'm sure it'll be a good future for the company and for you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And just as the last question, for people who do need a background check for their employees, should they just go to perfectfit.com? Where do they find you?
So our website is perfectfitbackgroundchecks.com. Of course, we would love to work with anyone that's looking for a vendor. Um, like I mentioned, like we work best with small and into the medium-sized business category. So kind of up into like 1,000 employees. I think that most of your listeners are going to fall into that category. But if not through us, I would encourage people to find a local vendor or mom and pop shop. It's something that they can oftentimes give you a more competitive rate than if you just Google it, and you get the small business service experience as well. So it's one of those, not every service is ideal for working with small business. Like sometimes big business is a good way to go, but this is one where it makes sense.
Okay. Well, you heard it. Perfectfitbackgroundchecks.com. It's Travis Reiter. And thanks for coming on the show, Travis. Great to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon.
And I want to thank our producer, Tim Alima, and coordinators, Diet Barnett and Daniel Huddleston. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your colleagues, friends, and family to subscribe. And please leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. It helps us in the rankings. Small business runs better on Thryv. Get a free demo at thryv.com/pod, or download our new free product, Command Center, at thryv.com. Until next time, make it a great week.